9 o'clock, on the nose. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis, and welcome to another edition of this wonderful relationship that you and I are starting to forge, where we spend a bit of time together, get to know each other. You can get in touch and message. If you're using an Echo Show, that's the best way. You just wake it up, say the word say, then your message. If you would like to type, you can go to backchannel.tv and type your message there. And if you don't have any of that stuff, just go to YouTube and watch the show and comment. We've got lots to talk about today. I'm very keen for you to kind of join in if you get the opportunity to do so. We're going to zigzag around the US, get a handle on what's happening with some of the biggest stories using the local papers, as Backchannel, as you know, is the only place where you can listen to, watch and chat with hosts of live shows right here on your device. So today's show includes the Ukraine war. Zelensky invokes 9/11 in his plea to the US Congress. A health agency under Cuomo misled the public on nursing home deaths. Returning to a topic that we couldn't fit in yesterday, we're going to look at how people deserve to know that their houses are going to burn. So we'll look at the insurance opportunities there are against fires and why they're not working anymore. And finally, Women's History Month. It's Selma Burke today, who discovered her love of sculpture as a young child and followed her passion to Harlem, Renaissance, New York, Parisian art studios, and even the White House. All of that to come here on the Backchannel. Stacey's already in. She's literally almost started before me. So welcome, Stacey. Great to know that you're here for a lunch hour with us. That's wonderful. You can do the same. Just ping me as you see fit. We're going to start the morning papers this morning with the Bakersfield Californian. Upcoming Kern budget tells familiar story. This is about Kern County, of course. Another year of little financial growth, although officials contend county government is on firm financial footing to go into the next fiscal year. So that's a good start, isn't it? What else do we have here? Suspect in agriculture crimes faces 48 felony charges. Yeah, it's interesting. This crime isn't just like as obvious as you might think it is. You know, I mean, the fact that there's agriculture crime is probably the first crime that ever happened, if you think about it. Because agriculture, everything started with agriculture, everything. Including the banks. I mean, if you read the books about economies started with farmers and people who owned grain and bales of hay. They were the first lenders. They were the first people that took your produce, stored it, and gave you money in return. Yeah, I think that, and also just look at America as a territory. I mean, it's like full of agriculture, and obviously there's far more ways to commit a crime there and go unnoticed. So the suspect is now facing 48 felony charges as well as 5 misdemeanors that were filed Monday in Kern County Superior Court. He's charged with 19 counts of stealing copper materials or cables, 19 counts of vandalism of more than $400 or more. 2 counts of willful cruelty to a child and other charges, including car theft. He pleaded not guilty at his arraignment, and is due back in court on April 12 for his pre-preliminary hearing. So there we are. That's interesting, isn't it? And then Sterile Moth Program aims to protect local almond and pistachio grows. This is sterile moths taking off from an airport in Shafter this week are the latest recruits for a test program. Local almond and pistachio growers hope will lead to the eradication of one of their worst enemies. I mean, the technology they use now to try and prevent, pests, it's very interesting, very interesting. So, and also Bakersfield sees water usage decline, but statewide numbers increase 2.6%. Yes, it's like permanently a drought in California. People need to realize that. So there we go. That's the Bakersfield Californian. Oh, Jonathan's popped in. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome. He's listening. First time on the show. Thrilled to know you're here. Thank you so much. If you want to watch us, we're on YouTube. If you have an Echo Show, then you can just ask it to open Backchannel. Okay, next up on the newspaper front, we're going to stay local to me. We're going to go to the Los Angeles Times, remain in California. Europeans visit boosts Ukraine. It says as Russian forces press their deadly assault on Tuesday on Ukraine's capital, The besieged country received new gestures of important international support. The arrival in Kiev of leaders of 3 European nations and a planned trip to Brussels next week by President Biden for an emergency summit at NATO headquarters. The White House announced that Biden will attend an emergency session of NATO next week as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pushed a call for urgent military aid. In a virtual speech to the Canadian Parliament, a message he is expected to repeat on Wednesday to the US Congress. Well, I think he already did that this morning. With the time difference and everything, I think that's already done. He basically said that whatever equipment you think you're sending and you think it's enough, we use that in half a day. Right? He says we use it in half a day. You got to send more. And he keeps pushing for this kind of closure of the skies, doesn't he? He really believes that this is the way to go. And of course, America believes that that could instigate a greater, world war. Ukrainian Jews escaping to Israel, it says the bombing of Ukraine's already begun. But Ilya and Yulia Tregubov could not quite bring themselves to leave. The couple, both 40, lived in a picturesque city in central Ukraine with their 14-year-old daughter. They enjoyed a tranquil life, strolling the city's riverbank, or simply watching Netflix together. They vacationed in a summer home just outside Dnipro, where they'd pick fruit from apricot, apple, and cherry trees. As the war intensified, they turned down offers to help them evacuate. We thought one more day and it will be stopped. All this horror will be stopped, they thought. Then Russia began bombing civilian areas in Kharkiv and Kiev. So, time to go, it seems. I mean, that's the worry, isn't it? You worry that you'll leave and your home just won't be there if you ever return. And that's often the case. And what do? I mean, you become an economic and political refugee, and what are you left with? Like everything you've worked for and built. Look, they were sitting in a home watching Netflix like you or me, just doing the same thing that we do. There is no difference between them and us. Yet they will leave, and if they were choosing to return, they would return to no home. So if they were renting that home would be gone. If they own that home, they would have lost the money that home afforded them. More than 3 million people have fled Ukraine since the war started. The Tregubovs are among thousands of Jews who've moved to Israel in a rescue operation launched by the Israeli government and the greater Jewish community. States' water savings dry up. Californians' usage increase in January, alarming officials amid a historic drought. I mean, it's just relentless, isn't it? It says California will end winter in a perilous position as record-shattering dryness converges with lagging water conservation efforts in nearly every part of the state. After months of cutting back, new data from the State Water Sources Control Board show that rather than conserving water, Californians increased urban water use 2.6% in January compared with the same month in 2020, the baseline year against which current savings are measured. I mean, I'll be honest, living here in California, I think they could do more to talk about the water saving, I made the mistake of washing my car yesterday, but I did it in about 1 minute, with a hose. Just getting all the dust off. I'm not supposed to do that. But I literally did. And also the other thing is, I take the shortest showers. I use hardly any water. I'm like super water conscious. But I haven't washed the car for like 2 months. And I could barely see out the windows. So I just sprayed it down. I didn't take it to a car wash or go to one of these places where they use bucket loads of water. Literally took a minute. But the point is that, we're living in a desert. And the water is piped in from miles away. Some very interesting documentaries about how they get water into California. You should take a look. Mr. Mulholland was the man, Mulholland Drive is very famous as the street that named after him. But Mr. Mulholland basically worked out how to bring water in from the mountains. And so all of California's water comes in from the mountains in a pipeline. And you know something? It's not even pumped. It all falls The pipe is designed so that the water can just basically flow from the mountains. It's just like snow water that's dissolved. But it's a problem because, fundamentally California is a desert. And, where is this? I mean, there is the potential for the water to dry out. There's so many. California is one of the greatest states to live in terms of like freedom and liberty and sanctuary and all of these things. But it's also potentially dangerous in terms of earthquakes, drought, global warming, heating. It's potentially in a decade's time, it might be very difficult to live here. Everyone's going to turn on the air conditioning. And that, of course, is going to cause even more problems because air conditioning puts out gas. Debbie's just joined us from Florida. Welcome back, Debbie. Oh, no, it's your first time. First time. Nice to see you. I can't see you, but you can see me. Nice to see you, Debbie. Welcome to Backchannel. It's 14 minutes after 1, 9, 10, 11, 12. After 12 for you. Sorry, my time zone stuff is crazy. I haven't spoken out loud to anybody today. It's the morning here. So this show is, it's like the first time I talk. The first time I talk is when I talk to you. And sometimes I'm like, I don't have a voice. Similar. So that's the LA Times for you this morning. We'll look at some of these associated stories a little bit later in some more detail together. But first, let's go to the Akron Beacon Journal, which is informing, engaging, and essential, apparently. Workers use vax exceptions. It says March 15 is the federal government's final deadline for all Ohio nursing home staff to be fully vaccinated against COVID. And Ohio is doing just fine, said the head of the state's largest long-term care association. They're in pretty decent shape as far as compliance, they say. After fears a vaccine mandate would exacerbate staffing shortages at many nursing facilities, it may not be the case. That may seem a surprise to many, given Ohio ranks near the bottom in the nation for vaccination rate of workers. At the end of February, with 88% of facilities reporting only 3/4 of the workforce was fully vaccinated. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I just think that still, even now, after like 10 billion doses have been administered around the world with no serious side effects, people are still like, I'm not sure. It's like, really? Really? It's just a vaccine. It's just a vaccine. Summit gets an additional $2.4 million for rent and utility help. This is Summit County has received this money from the federal government to distribute to county residents negatively affected by the COVID pandemic to make their rent and utility payments. And also, DeWine's gun record leads to attacks from left and right. This is Governor Mike DeWine, once earned an F rating from the National Rifle Association. But just minutes after he signed legislation allowing Ohioans to carry concealed weapons without permits or training, the National Gun Group was singing his praises. I mean, why? Why? You're not free living in a city where people are carrying weapons, concealing weapons, I don't see how that equates to safety. We all know that the more guns there are, the more gun deaths there are. There is absolutely no evidence to suggest that more guns means being more safe. There's like 200,000 gun deaths a year in America. It might even be more now. And there's none in England. There's none. Like 2, maybe. It's just what they've been telling you about you being safer because there are more guns is a lie. It's propaganda born of the National Rifle Association. It's just not true. That's also on the front of the Kentucky Inquirer this morning. DeWine's gun record attacked from left and right. Signing of permitless carry bill aligns him more with NRA. I mean, I thought the NRA was finished. They went bankrupt. It's just so stupid to me, It's just so stupid to me. The people that, advocate for guns, they just really have so much time on their hands, Fine, have a gun. I'm not saying we should take your guns, but license it. Learn about it. Get trained on it. Be responsible for it. Lock it away. These things are essential. Look at all the kids that get shot every year because they find their parents loaded guns. Hundreds of children die every year because they find their parents loaded guns. And of course, there's some lawmakers like Lauren Boebert who put out famously her Christmas card, which was her and all of her children holding semi-automatic weapons in front of the Christmas tree. It's like, really? Eileen's joined us, Ethan's joined us, Debbie, Penny, Lana, Jonathan. Welcome to Backchannel. Nice to see you. Okay, back to the morning papers. The Cincinnati I've done that one. Times reporter for Ohio now is next. They lead with parents of missing daughter still hope. This is the mystery of Susan Wolf Capel's disappearance, which remains. She disappeared 40 years ago, this girl. I mean, it's just... I mean, as a parent, I think about these things all the time, Just not knowing is the worst part of this, just not knowing. Ohio nixes concealed carry gun permits. Ohioans can carry a concealed weapon without a permit in about 3 months because of a bill signed into law by Republican Governor Mike DeWine on Monday. Lovely. Tuscan United raises $611,000. That's the conclusion of its 79th annual fundraising campaign with virtual awards ceremonies sponsored by Cleveland Clinic Union Hospital. And New Philadelphia asked to contribute towards resurfacing stadium track. So there's the Times reporter. Let's go to Chicago now. Chicago Tribune. Cops won't face criminal charges in fatal shooting. Wonderful. This is almost a year after 13-year-old Adam Toledo was killed by a Chicago police officer in Little Village Alley, sparking shock and grief around the country. Cook County State Attorney Kim Fox announced her office would not bring criminal charges against the officer who fired the fatal shot, nor will they charge the officer who killed the 22-year-old Anthony Alvarez, who was shot by police 2 days after Toledo's death. Both Toledo and Alvarez were carrying guns on the nights they were shot, and despite their sorrow of their family and Fox's deep concerns about police foot pursuits, prosecutors determined that both officers reasonably believed they were in danger when they opened fire. They said there are no winners in this very tragic situation, saying there was not sufficient evidence to bring murder charges to either officer. I mean, they executed these people. The police executed them because they were scared that they might get shot themselves. I mean, surely a police officer's job is to get shot occasionally. Isn't that part of their job? In protecting others? Isn't that what the bravery is all about? There's nothing brave about going in and executing somebody. Bravery is about taking a bullet or being able to diffuse a situation with your words. That's bravery. Anybody can fire a gun. A photograph of a resident reacting after being rescued from her apartment by firefighters at a residential apartment building after it was hit by a Russian attack in Kiev on Tuesday. The headline, "Two sides meet as carnage grinds on." Ukraine, signs of potential agreement in talks with Russia. It says Ukraine said it saw possible room for compromise on Tuesday in talks with Russia, while Moscow's forces stepped up their bombardment of Kiev and an estimated 20,000 civilians fled the desperately encircled port city of Mariupol by way of a humanitarian corridor. It says the fast-moving development on the diplomatic front and on the ground came on the 20th day of Russia's invasion, as the number of Ukrainians fleeing the country amid Europe's heaviest fighting since World War II eclipsed 3 million. And this is very interesting. interesting. Women opting to go back and help, motivated to help loved ones or contribute to the defense of the country. Expatriate Ukrainian women are braving Russian bombs to return. I mean, why is that not the biggest headline? You know, it's excuse me. This has been something that we're hearing more and more about. Is the brave women far braver than those 2 police officers that killed those kids? Of course. Let's think about that for a second. You know. Where are all the police officers in America that love shooting their guns, offering to go in and fight against Russia? Independently. Maybe there's some. Okay, next. Let's go to the Naperville Sun. Fentanyl found in most 2021 OD deaths. It says heroin is taking the back seat to the more potent and synthetic opioid fentanyl. Statistics from the coroner's office show DuPage County had 1 death in 2021 from heroin alone compared to 29 deaths from fentanyl alone. That's a big shift, given that 2015, most opioid deaths then involved heroin. Yeah, I mean, look, fentanyl, man. It's like, this is the new silent killer. Naperville still ranks number 1 city to raise family. It says blame old man winter and the cost of living for dragging down Naperville's grades in Niche's 2022 best places to live. It says Naperville ranked 3rd behind the Woodlands and Texas in Niche.com's best city to live in America, where Naperville continues to outrank the Houston suburb as the category of best city to raise a family and the city with the best public schools in America. Naperville is number 1 again in both, and the Woodlands trail at number 2 for raising a family, number 6 for its schools. Well, that's good to know. I mean, I think if you go looking for it, you're going to find you're going to find the results that you need somewhere, even if it means having to go to niche.com, which in itself is a little niche. I got my daughter's school report yesterday. She's 6 years of age, and I was very impressed with the way the school laid out the report, and they made it so clear to see in samples of her work, and man, she's doing so well. It's the first time, because she's obviously in proper school now, and so it's the first time I've had a proper report from her teachers, and it's makes you so proud as a parent to see your child is able to read and write and do math and all of these things and be given great grades. Yeah, maybe they just say this to everybody, But anyway, I was proud of her. Okay, next up, Lake County News Sun. Oh, no, I've done that one. Hang on, let's scroll. Here's the Lake County News Sun. They lead with police feuds to blame for spate of violence. Zion police say they made a number of arrests and confiscated weapons after targeting 2 groups police believe were behind a recent rash of gun violence. Officials said the department conducted a crime suppression detail that began on Thursday and ran through the weekend. Zion officers and representatives of the Lake County Special Investigations Group made 6 felony arrests for weapons charges and recovered 5 guns, including a machine gun, during the sweep, according to authorities. This crime sweep nets arrests, weapons, and stolen cars. I mean, people just have nothing to do. I mean, this is part of the problem, isn't it? People just turn to these, turn to crime because they literally can't think of anything to do. We have such a kind of benign, uninspired generation. There are some individuals doing wonderful things who are really motivated and creative and really showing themselves to be, like Gen Z, just doing really good stuff. And yet there are others who just cannot get started. And crime is like one of the few places where they can feel like they've achieved something. It's very easy to do that. Voters to see 26 contested primaries. It says voters across Lake County will be choosing between candidates in 26 contested primaries on June 28, with 8 incumbents facing opposition, including 2 members of Congress who hope to represent parts of the county. Barring successful challenges to petitions, voter choices are set for June 28 primary election in Lake County as voters choose major party nominees for Congress, Illinois General Assembly, county-wide officers, and members of the Lake County Board for the November 8 general election. And a story about applicants participating in the American Place Career Fair this week may have to leave with an offer and may leave with an offer to work at a new casino. Isn't that wonderful? You know, you went to the fair looking for a good job and you end up working in a casino. I mean, maybe a casino is a good job, I don't know, but I just associate gambling with being bad. Maybe that's just my upbringing. Gambling is bad. It is. Because the people that gamble are the people who have no money. And so that they end up, wealthy people do not gamble. It's only the poorest people that gamble. Yeah, the Lake County News Sun has kind of lost its way a little bit, I think, maybe, with that headline. Let's have a look at the Herald Bulletin now for... where is the Herald Bulletin from? Oh, Indiana. That's right, Indiana. Piper says, is this really live? Yes, Piper, it's really live. I am literally sitting right here. You're in Canada watching on your Echo show. I'm sitting here in Los Angeles, California, completely live. Stacy says you should be proud of your daughter. After all, she is your child. And Davis says, I'm going to eat you. Well, knock yourself out. Morgan's here. Davis, Natalie, Piper, and Jerry. First time on the show from Minnesota. Jerry, hi. Welcome. Great to see you. The Herald Bulletin for this morning says 2020 jail lawsuit could be settled in May. Initial agreement would pay those detained on warrantless arrests. Yes, an Indianapolis judge has set a hearing for May in a class action lawsuit against Madison County Sheriff Department. Also, county opts back into opioid drug settlement. Local share expected to be $3.2 million. Big part expected for public health. This is off the back of Madison County and other places that are basically suing pharmaceutical companies and the like for their role in the opioid crisis. And video of Anderson's Indian and maiden dance stirs controversy. I'm not surprised. And finally, Indiana Attorney General bills state $2,300 for his border trip. Yes, he went to the U.S.-Mexico border in January. That included a stop at Donald Trump's rally along the way. The costs include flight, gas, car, rental, hotel expenses. This is for Attorney General Todd Rokita. And 2 staffers for the trip, during which Rokita joined several other Republican state attorney general for a border security briefing with Texas Governor Greg Abbott. I knew this was going to have Abbott's fingerprints all over it. It's graceful. So, there it is. Yeah, let's go back to this story of Anderson High School. It says since the 1920s it's been represented by the Indian mascot, but a recent video posted to TikTok has the school under fire. In the 50s, the Indian mascot and the maiden mascot, which had been introduced a decade earlier, started performing a dance routine at home basketball games. On the 22nd of February, Sarah Holber, who is from northern Indiana and is on TikTok, posted a video critical of the dance to the app. The video also captured another AHS pre-game ritual, such as cheerleaders passing around a ceremonial peace pipe. Well, as of Tuesday, the video, which carries the hashtag cultural appropriation, had more than 688,000 views. Other TikTok users have overlaid their comments on the original video, as well as adding to the attention it has drawn. Newsweek posted an article about the video on March 3rd. I mean, why does the principal of this school, knowing the way the world is now, where we respect people's culture by not replicating it, why does he still allow this to continue? It said school district officials and representatives of the Delaware Tribe of Indians had a preliminary phone call on Monday to open a dialogue. ACS plans to form a committee to evaluate the pre-game dance and peace pipe ritual beginning as early as April. The committee could include ACS representatives and external members, noting the school district would keep in contact with the Delaware Tribe throughout the process. They explained the peace pipe in the pre-game ritual is offensive. Peace pipe rituals are sacred to her. Spiritual leaders use a peace pipe for prayer, Haza said. I mean, it's just there's no self-awareness. You know, this is the thing. It's like, it's so important these days to be self-aware, to be woke. Just wake up. They like everyone who kind of is involved in these types of things. They actually enjoy being a little bit racist. You know, there's like a pleasure to be had from doing, you know, on the outside, kind of showing willing, but on the inside, being a little bit racist. Because, you know, they've been taught their whole lives that to be white is to be superior. And so by maintaining this white supremacy, they're able to, you know, by doing like peace pipe rituals, it's almost like maintaining their white supremacy. It's so crazy. Okay, let's look at the Evansville Courier Press. Home prices are on the rise there. The median sales price for a single-family home in Vanderburgh County during December was $167,000. That's an increase of 11.3% compared to December 2020. Wow, that's crazy. Where I am here in Los Angeles, I think the average price of a home is nearer like $700,000. Might be more. Might be $1 million. The Journal Gazette, finally, for Indiana, leads with VA hospital targeted for closure. Outpatient services proposed, process just beginning. Ukraine sees hope for deal in peace talks. I mean, they said this yesterday. I just don't know, you know? I just don't know if there's going to be any success off the back of these talks. Like I said, I feel like as long as Russia is winning, they really have no reason to talk. Ukraine said it saw possible room for compromise on Tuesday in talks with Russia, while Moscow's forces, stepped up their bombardment of Kiev, and an estimated 20,000 civilians fled the desperately encircled port city of Mariupol by way of a humanitarian corridor. The fast-moving developments on the diplomatic front and on the ground came on the 20th day of Russia's invasion as the number of Ukrainians fleeing the country amid Europe's heaviest fighting since World War II eclipsed 3 million. And finally, Pfizer to seek okay for fourth COVID shot. Drug maker Pfizer is expected to request authorization this week for an additional COVID-19 booster dose for seniors, according to a person familiar with the matter. It would add a fourth dose to the regimen, currently a primary series of 2 shots, followed months later by a booster dose in an effort to provide maximum protection to the over 65 population that has been hit hardest by the pandemic. The Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention would have to approve the request. The person who spoke about the upcoming Pfizer authorization spoke on condition of anonymity. Yeah, they always do that. They're like, don't say it was me. I mean, you can understand why people might need a fourth dose. I would totally take a fourth dose. You know, if the seniors are getting it, I'm definitely getting it. And you can do that now, you know. It's like you just go down, you'd be like, can I have another dose? They're like, yeah, go on then. Plonk. We need to talk about Zelensky because of his plea to Congress this morning, as he invoked the horror of the 2001 terror attacks on the US, and he pleaded for more military aid in an historic address to the US Congress. It looks like Davis and Stacey are having an argument with each other in the chat facility. Please don't argue with each other. You can talk to me by all means, but don't go at each other. It's not necessary. Debbie's just joined us from Ohio. First time on the show. Welcome. And Jerry is with us as well. Piper, Natalie, Morgan, Ethan, Penny, Lana, Jonathan. Wonderful to know that you're all hanging out here. Great. Volodymyr Zelensky said via video link that Ukraine was enduring a 9/11 every day as it battled Russian forces. He again urged the US and NATO allies to enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine, saying, "I need to protect the sky." Joe Biden is set to sign off an extra $800 million in military aid to Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky urged the assembled US politicians to remember coming under attack in the past at Pearl Harbor in 1941 and on the 11th of September 2001, saying Ukrainians were experiencing the same thing every day. In your great history, you have pages that would allow you to understand the Ukrainian history. Understand us now, he said. I mean, I don't really agree with that. Oddly, I don't think that all Americans can connect with Pearl Harbor. I think a bombing on the mainland is very different to a bombing on in Hawaii, for example. And I'm obviously, I think about it, and hopefully you think about it, but I do think there's a lot of Americans who don't connect. I mean, look, Donald Trump tried to convince the world that Hawaii wasn't even America when he was trying to claim that Barack Obama wasn't American. Does that mean that he doesn't respect Pearl Harbor? Zelensky also referenced U.S. civil rights leader Martin Luther King's famous speech, "I have a dream." These words are known to each of you. Today, I can say I have a need. I need to protect the sky, he said. The Ukrainian leader also showed a video of the missile strikes on his country's cities and resulting dead and wounded people. I mean, he was an actor and he was in a show called Servant of the People. That was his show. Well, apparently it's back on Netflix. I mean, isn't it crazy? Isn't Netflix capitalizing here on the war? Netflix is like, there's an opportunity for some viewers. Let's stick it back on. He was in this show between 2015 and 2019. It was a political comedy series that starred Volodymyr Zelensky before he entered politics for real. The streamer tweeted that the Servant of the People is once again available on Netflix in the US. The satirical comedy stars Zelensky playing a teacher who unexpectedly becomes president after a video of him complaining about corruption suddenly goes viral. The series was in the Netflix library from 2017 to 2021. Zelensky ran for president of Ukraine in 2019, naming his political party after the series. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Today's announcement comes as Zelensky, former comedian and actor, reaches new heights of popularity for his leadership and defiance in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In a speech to Congress today, the president of Ukraine received a standing ovation, saying, I'm addressing President Biden. You are the leader of the nation. I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace. I'm kind of excited to watch Servant of the People now. I kind of feel bad wanting to watch it. He's got a great face, Volodymyr Zelensky. He really does have a great face both as an actor and as a leader. But he was impassioned earlier when he made this speech to Congress. He appeared on screens, He was invited by Nancy Pelosi. He also called for Congress to he asked them for Soviet-made air defense systems and fighter jets as an alternative to a NATO-enforced humanitarian no-fly zone over his country's airspace. US and NATO officials have so far declined his pleas for a no-fly zone over Ukraine because such a measure will place NATO warplanes at risk of direct engagement with Russian aircraft, raising the possibility of a nuclear confrontation. Stacey says I have to check that out. What, the TV show? Yes, I don't blame you. It's so interesting. We love crossover, don't we? You know, it's a bit like when Spider-Man shows up in a kind of Captain America movie. You know, the idea of these characters appearing in different places. And I think that's why Trump got elected, is because, you know, people saw him on The Apprentice and they were like, well, it'd be kind of fun to take this guy out of this, like, benign medium and make him the most powerful man in the world and see how the country collapses. Eric's joined us. Hi, Eric from Michigan. Great to see you. Welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony. We're discussing Ukraine, obviously. Later today, Biden's expected to announce $800 million of aid to the Eastern European country, a sum that would bring the total aid sent to Ukraine in the last week alone to $1 billion. Biden's also reportedly considering providing Ukraine with US-made drones, including the recently developed so-called loitering missile system known as Switchblade. Drones have played a major part in Ukraine's defense against the Russian assault, in particular TB2 drones supplied by Turkey. Antony Blinken, who's the US Secretary of State, is looking very hard, he says, at whether Russia is deliberately targeting journalists covering the war in Ukraine, after at least 3 have been killed and several more injured by Kremlin forces in the last few days alone. Well, of course they are, you know? I was surprised that more didn't happen to the woman who 2 days ago decided to sabotage the news show with a sign that said they're lying to you. She got fined like 3,000 rubles, but she didn't get imprisoned, and I'm surprised at that. It's being reported that the House is going to vote tomorrow on rescinding normal trade relations with Russia. Negotiations and review of the text are ongoing. I don't know why that wasn't done like 2 weeks ago. And in the meantime, Tucker Carlson, the host on that Fox show, has criticized the strong support for Ukraine from U.S. civic, business and political leaders, calling it the largest political flash mob in American history. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has brought Republicans and Democrats together in a rare moment of bipartisan fury directed at Russian President Putin, who has pushed a false narrative to motivate his invasion. But the Fox News host has been accused of parroting Russian propaganda, and he continues to do so. And as he does, they then the Russians take what he's been saying, thinking that he speaks for all Americans, and then they repost it on Russian TV, you know? So arguably, Tucker Carlson is elongating the war by nature of the bile that he spiels, you know, the lies that he tells, the propaganda. Isn't it crazy, you know, how... I mean, I noticed yesterday Russia has sanctioned all these prominent Americans, including Biden and Clinton and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and various people, but not Donald Trump. He's not been sanctioned by the Russians because he's working for the Russians and always has been. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer tweeted, President Zelensky united a room full of members of the U.S. Senate and House quickly and intensely, with equal parts resolve and unity and determination to save democracy from an hour of darkness. He said Congress and the American people stands with the people of Ukraine. Top House Republicans went from a bipartisan standing ovation for Ukrainian President Zelensky to bashing President Biden in a matter of minutes. That's nice, isn't it? The president of the Council on Foreign Relations noted that President Zelensky's address was a complex balancing act. He tweeted the Ukrainian leader's remarks were careful, advocating a no-fly zone, but signaling he would accept arms that could come close to establishing one. Praising Biden for what he has done and also pushing him to do more, all bolstered by a video with images of Ukraine before and after. It is kind of amazing, isn't it, that considering that he's in Kiev in government buildings with bombing going on all around him, he's still able to put together a really good speech with accompanying visuals. You know? still able to write a good speech and present a good speech. The guy is amazing. If you want to get in touch, you can let me know in the chat. You can send me a chat. Just remember, say is the magic word. So you can wake up your Echo show, say the word say, and then your message. And if you have a friend or family member and you reckon they'd love to get involved, but they don't have an Echo show, that's no problem. They can head over to our YouTube channel and watch and make comments there. Just search for Backchannel. We'll pop up, and make sure you subscribe once you find us there. If you're listening on an Echo speaker, just grab your phone and go to backchannel.tv to join the chat. That's backchannel.tv. There it is. Eric's with us. Stacey's saying they should have sanctioned Trump. Well, they won't, because Trump ultimately has been a Russian asset for 20 years and continues to be one, and he and his cronies are still supporting Russia throughout all of this. The language he uses is very non-committal, and he does it on purpose. He wants to maintain his relationship with Russia because it's all about him putting himself first. So he's thinking about future business interests. It's just mob behavior. And it's not unusual, it's not surprising. You see the way that Trump behaves and performs, and everything is calculated to make him look good. It's super sad that, people can be so treasonous to their own country and have no concept of what it means to be American and to know the difference between a friend and a foe, and to recognize that Russia has committed atrocities and continues to do so. And yet still they support him. Still, Trump and his cronies and Tucker Carlson, they still choose Russia over America. Still. How much evidence do you need, The worst thing I heard Carlson say a couple of weeks ago was like, well, what's Russia ever done to me? It's not called me this, it's not called me that, using all of the phrases that Democrats might say about him. And he's like, they've not said any of these things. Why should I hate Russia? And I was like, wow, is that really the argument that you're prepared to use right now? Is that all you have? But the biggest issue with this is it's sowing confusion amongst the American people who are too busy to read up or too busy to learn in any great depth because they're trying to, work. And so they trust people like Tucker Carlson to tell them what they need to hear. And so you end up with a kind of false narrative, convinced that that's the way it is, and it's just not the way it is, There's so much contradiction here. I think Biden's being brilliant, I'll be honest. Most of what Biden's done you haven't even seen. What Biden's done is he's brought all of the European nations, all of the allied groups together to make sure they're all singing off the same hymn sheet. That's what Biden's done. Because otherwise you'd see countries going rogue and you'd see some kind of, sending planes in. And it's not been like that. It's been very organized and led by America. America has taken the lead on the way this needs to play out. And if this war lasts a month, then that would have been testament to the way Biden has handled it, because anybody else could have been less thoughtful about the consequences of going in hard, and we would be obliterated. We'd be obliterated. There's too much at stake here to kind of go in guns a-blazing, and that's what worries me about all of these Republican lawmakers who yesterday said that Biden should agree to the no-fly zone and should send in aircraft. They love a fight, they're more prepared to kind of fight their way through this and win because of that kind of American exceptionalism where it's like, well, we've got the big guns, we can win this. With no consideration for diplomacy and the fact that actually maybe we could lose like we lost in Afghanistan. You know? That's my concern. It's very easy to kind of be machismo and have big cojones and kind of claim that you've got these super weapons, and so how can you possibly lose? You're going to lose. You know, Russia is very likely going to win this. And we have to be prepared for that. And just because we love Zelensky and just because we want Ukraine to be free doesn't mean that we shouldn't accept the reality that Russia is likely to win. And just because Russia wins, it doesn't mean they've won everything, because Ukrainian people will still have resolve and Zelensky will still exist. You know? It's a short-term win, potentially, but it does avoid nuclear war. Make the Russians feel like they've won. Maybe then they'll stop. Let's see this video.
So Hunter Biden didn't. No.
In 2019, this is what Tucker Carlson said. You can probably press that growy button there in the bottom right-hand corner of the video screen. You see the
so
video
Hunter
screen?
Biden didn't. Hunter Biden. I actually like Hunter Biden, but that's totally corrupt, and you know it. Why is it worse to ask about it than it is to do it?
Because people are dying on the front lines. You think it's a joke?
Why do I care? Why do I care what's going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? And I'm serious. Like, why do I care?
I'll tell you why.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
Because those of us who are watching, myself, who think preserving democracy is important. When Dick Cheney said what the Russians did was an attack,
I don't
it's
care.
a warlike attack on the U.S., and if Donald Trump gets off the hook on this, he's going to put the arm on the Chinese and everybody else.
So Hunter Biden.
I mean, you know, you couldn't see it any clearer than that. That really is the tragedy here, isn't it? You know, that we're dealing with a Fox News host. You've got to bear in mind, more people watch Tucker Carlson than any other news show in America. It's the most watched news program in America. And every night people turn to this guy in the same way as they did with Rush Limbaugh on the radio, you know, who was another far-right extremist who pretended that his views were normalized. And this is what Tucker Carlson does. He does it in a way where he's like, this is what we should all be thinking, you know, otherwise you're crazy. He is insane. Like, he is properly insane. To not care about the consequences of your own country. It's so dangerous. And yet, here we are. We're going to talk about former Governor Andrew Cuomo in just a moment, how he misled the public on the deaths in nursing homes when COVID first got underway a couple of years ago. But let's do the US News Update first. It's a little podcast that I do for you, which is daily and updates you on what's happening across the US. Here it is. It's Wednesday, March 16. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. Davis. Sarah Bloom Raskin withdrew her nomination on Tuesday to a position on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors after a key Democrat had joined with all Senate Republicans to oppose her confirmation. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin announced on Monday that he opposed Raskin's confirmation, and all Republicans in the evenly split 50-50 Senate indicated they planned to block her nomination for the position of the Fed's top banking regulator. Republicans have argued that Raskin would use the Fed's regulatory authority to discourage banks from lending to oil and gas companies. Democrats, as well as many banking executives, countered that Raskin's views aren't out of the mainstream and said she simply wants the Fed to consider the risks that climate change poses to banks, insurance companies, and other financial firms. President Joe Biden, who nominated Raskin in January, said she had unparalleled experience in areas like cybersecurity, climate change, and consumer protection. The president asserted in a statement that Sarah was subject to baseless attacks from industry and conservative interest groups. Meanwhile, President Biden marked Equal Pay Day on Tuesday by spotlighting new steps aimed at closing the gender pay gap for federal workers and contractors, and he urged private companies to do likewise. Biden signed an Equal Pay Day executive order that encourages but does not order the government to consider banning federal contractors from seeking information about job applicants' prior salary history. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. There it is, the US News Update. You can get it wherever you download your podcasts from. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to Backchannel. It's 10 o'clock here on the nose, and welcome to another day, a brand new day. It's Wednesday, the 16th of March. Thank you to everybody who's joining in and listening to the show. Paul has just jumped in as well. Brand new listener, brand new viewer. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony. Debbie's with us as well. Eric and Tracy and Laurie and Jerry. Piper, Natalie, Morgan, Eli, Ethan, Penny. I think I said Penny already. Welcome. And Stacey as well, of course. It's time to talk about Andrew Cuomo, everybody's favorite former governor, you know? Under ex-Governor Andrew Cuomo, New York's health agency undercounted at least 4,100 COVID-relating nursing home deaths, according to a state audit. Yes, the New York Health Department misled the public, said State Controller Thomas DiNapoli, in his 58-page report. Mr. Cuomo last year admitted to a delay in reporting but did not apologize. The politician, a Democrat, resigned in August after an inquiry found he sexually harassed multiple women. He's repeatedly denied the sexual harassment allegations against him. In January, prosecutors in New York dropped a groping charge against the former governor, saying the accuser was credible, but there was not enough evidence to bring the case to court. Well, in the early days of the pandemic, Mr. Cuomo was lauded for his handling of the pandemic after New York experienced one of the worst initial COVID outbreaks in the country. In October 2020, he published American Crisis, a book of leadership lessons from that time, which seems ironic in contrast. I mean, look, or in hindsight, I should say. The thing about Andrew Cuomo is that, you know, people crave leadership. You know, we need it. We're very tribal, and we need an elder or a leader or somebody to kind of, especially in the face of a crisis, we need somebody to take charge. And he did that. He did a daily televised briefing where he was calm and measured, up to date, and I personally don't think that he hid nursing home deaths. I don't think that was in his nature. I think that was probably more to do with just, you know, reporting and numbers, and, you know, it was chaos. Back then it was chaos. But I also recognize that this guy was sexually inappropriate with countless women. And the thing that frustrates me the most about him is that he refused to accept that he was wrong. You know, this kind of constant denial. And the reality is that there are a lot of guys of his generation who don't understand that a bear hug is inappropriate. That don't understand that coming up behind a woman and putting your hands on their shoulders is inappropriate. It's generational, but it's also blindness, you know, like it's a kind of work blindness. Not understanding that the relationships that you have in work should be separate from the relationships you have in private. And here's the other thing. If you're like a handsome, charismatic, successful person like Governor Cuomo, you don't need to find people at work to behave like this with. You can find people in your private life. Go looking for it if you want to. But don't mix it with work, because then it's non-consenting. You know? I mean, I think the guy was married. I can't quite remember the details of it. You know, I don't really care much for people's private lives. I only really care about their work lives, so I don't really know anything about him. But I recognize that his behavior and his continual denial about the fact that he did anything wrong is so offensive to any woman that has been on the receiving end of sexual harassment. If you think about that. Think about it. It's so offensive. The former governor, since replaced by his former lieutenant governor, Kathy Hochul, came under fire for directing nursing homes to accept COVID-positive patients in the start of the pandemic. That led to the virus spreading like wildfire in those facilities, leading to an estimated 15,000 deaths among vulnerable residents. His alleged misleading behavior came as he was praised for his response to the initial COVID-19 outbreak and the publication of a controversial COVID memoir, for which he was paid $5 million. Death counts which were inaccurate, coupled with mismanagement, led to a situation in which the true number of nursing home deaths is still not 100% certain. Oh, really? I don't remember that. I don't actually remember talking about this guy's book. But apparently he didn't write it. He got his aides to write it. So, hopefully they're suing him as well. And then, of course, there's the whole story with his brother, which is Chris Cuomo, who was a CNN anchor. And a very good one, too, They're all lawyers, these people. They all train as lawyers and then they choose their profession. And Chris Cuomo advised his brother on how to shake off these allegations of sexual misconduct. And for that reason, he got fired from CNN. It says, while the department's duty is to act solely to promote public health, we determine that rather than providing accurate and reliable information during a public health emergency, the department instead conformed its presentation to the executive's narrative, often presenting data in a manner that misled the public. The pandemic was devastating and deadly for New Yorkers living in nursing homes. Families have a right to know if their loved one's COVID-19 death was counted, but many still don't have the answers from the State Department of Health, said DiNapoli in his report. It says, our audit findings are extremely troubling. The public was misled by those at the highest levels of state government through distortion and suppression of the facts, when New Yorkers deserved the truth. It says the pandemic is not over, and I'm hopeful the current administration will make changes to improve accountability and protect lives. An important step would be for the DOH to provide the families who lost loved ones with answers as to the actual number of nursing home residents who died. These families are still grieving and they deserve no less, he said. The audit, which runs to some 58 pages, found the Department of Health used alternative methodologies to account for nursing home deaths during the pandemic and consistently underreported the total number. For example, the audit states that between May 3rd and February 3rd, the Cuomo administration had internal data showing 13,147 nursing home residents had died from COVID, but they were only publicly reporting 9,076. It says among the findings in the controller's audit was the understating of nursing home deaths by at least 4,100. The reported death counts divided between those occurred inside nursing homes and those which occurred in hospitals. And also, Cuomo only counted residents who died in elder care facilities, not those who died in hospitals, when releasing information about nursing homes. The controller suggested that at times during the crisis, the number was undercounted by more than 50% in order for Governor Cuomo to continue to push a narrative that would make it appear as though things in New York State were under control. Officials at the Department of Health have been unable to explain the discrepancies in the figures, according to the audit, which notes that the executive repeatedly reported incorrect data, inflating the perception of New York's performance against other states. I mean, do you remember when states were having to bid against other states to get personal protective equipment from the federal government? Do you remember that? When Trump was withholding equipment and basically only wanting to send it to states that supported him and said that he'd done a good thing. I mean, talk about the wrong guy at the wrong time in the wrong job. It was a disaster. Tamika has just joined us from Virginia. Welcome, Tamika. Nice to see you. Hello has joined us as well. And Paul and Debbie and Eric, thank you. Thank you for spending your morning here on Backchannel. We're looking at Governor Andrew Cuomo and seeing how his reporting of COVID-19 has been questioned by a report that says that he undercounted nursing home deaths by 4,100. I mean, this is my point to you. I don't understand why it would be necessary for him to undercount in this way. You know, it's like it wasn't a competition at the time. He seems so open with figures. This is why, to me, it just seems like a miscommunique. But I'm prepared to give the auditors the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying the extra number of people didn't die, but it depends on what category you put them in. And they're saying that he only counted people that died in nursing homes. Well, if you're announcing nursing home deaths, then should you just announce people in nursing homes or the people that have been taken from a nursing home into hospital? Is that also a nursing home death? Or is that a hospital death? Do you see what I mean? It's like there's a little bit of confusion as to how you present this. And the other thing is, he's not the one who's trawling over the figures. It's probably an intern working in a back office, like putting these numbers together and collating them for him. You know, it's like there's a lot of people involved. I'm not defending him. I just recognize that sometimes these things are put, you know, the blame is sent to the guy at the top when the guy at the top's got enough on his plate right now, you know? I think fundamentally he did a good job in advising the people of New York, and he did a thoroughly bad job being a sexual predator in the workplace. So, I mean, you know, that's just who the guy is, and he's already lost his job, he's already resigned, he's already, you know, paying the price for this, and so's his brother, and so the punishment is kind of, you know, is underway. And maybe, I don't know much about being convicted for certain crimes, but, you know, why not? You know, if he's committed the crime, they're just saying that there's not enough evidence for that. We need to talk about the house insurance thing in California. You know, I talked a little bit earlier about the drought, shortage of water here in California. And so since 2016, more than 50,000 structures in California have been destroyed by wildfire. During fire season in the West, when the sky is dim with smoke and the sun's an eerie red, you might find yourself breathing in tiny carbonized particles of what used to be someone's front porch swing. Well, those fires are only going to get worse as the climate warms unless we want to keep risking lives, inhaling incinerated dreams. Something has to change. But what, I hear you ask? Well, the California Department of Insurance last month released new regulations that require insurance companies to reward homeowners who take steps to protect their home from wildlife, such as clearing brush and trees from the immediate vicinity of their home or putting out on a fire-resistant roof. The policy is being widely praised, but it raises a broader question. As climate risks to our property and our livelihoods and our lives mount, to what extent should we cushion the blow of these dangers? And is there a limit to how much or how long we pay? Is there a point where protecting people from risks begets more risk? California makes a good case study because it leads the nation in both annual number and extent of wildfires. Climate change, no surprise, is making things much worse. 18 of the largest fires in California history have happened since the turn of the millennium, 12 of them since 2016. A meteorologist, Mark Bove, a senior vice president of natural catastrophe solutions for Munich Reinsurance America, told The Atlantic magazine that the California wildfire situation was rocking the insurance industry. He said, "We're trying to figure out this new landscape along with everyone else. All the premium earned over 3 decades of writing business was gone in the wine country and campfires." One estimated from the actual firm Millman penciled out that 2 years of fires undid 26 years of profits for the state's insurers. Insurance companies are prohibited by state law from using models of future conditions to set their rates, but with the fires of the past 5 years or so, even backwards-looking risk calculations are beginning to prompt insurers to raise rates or to refuse to renew policies. Some areas are becoming so risky that insurance companies simply won't sell policies there. And in 32 states, rejected homeowners can always get coverage through programs known as FAIR plans, which are insurance pools that run collectively by every company offering homeowners insurance in the state. That's interesting. I wonder how you do that. I wonder how you get a FAIR plan. It says as more and more homeowners in fire-prone areas mitigate these stopgap plans, a FAIR plan is gradually ceasing just to be a temporary solution, according to analysis. Economists at California State University in Los Angeles and their March 2022 paper shows that FAIR plan premiums in Los Angeles County simply do not reflect the real risk, that they are more influenced by factors such as the beds-to-bath ratio of a house and how likely it is to go up in flames. Well, maybe you've been a victim of this. I mean, I actually had a storm issue recently, where I might have mentioned this, where the rain kind of came through the ceiling. And, of course, the building's insurance wouldn't have been cost-effective for the landlord to kind of make a claim. So he just said, look, tell me what got damaged and I'll pay for it. And that was very sweet of him. And I just said, well, I'll just take it out the rent. And I got a new electric piano. I got a new toaster. I got a new blender. So just some things, that got damaged by rainwater. I mean, literally rain poured into my piano for 6 hours, my electric piano. And the landlord kindly replaced it. But this is the reality, isn't it? That we're, the natural disasters meet the kind of corporate entity at some point. There is a point at which there is this kind of disconnect. It's a little bit like if you total your car and they don't give you the full amount for the vehicle. And you end up losing out. Even though you've been paying premiums for all these years, and you still lose out. Hi, Mickey. Welcome to the show from Oklahoma. First time on the show. Nice to see you. Jessica's joined us. Hi, Jessica. Welcome. Bruce is here as well. And Tamika. Wonderful that we're all hanging out together on this Wednesday morning. It's the 16th of March. I'm Anthony Davis. And we're kind of just taking a look at the wildfires in the US, certainly in California, and talking about getting insured for them as well. Stephen just joined as well from Alabama. This is about people deserving to know that their houses are going to burn. The old way of insuring against fires isn't working anymore. In 32 states, rejected homeowners could always get coverage through programs known as FAIR plans. We've been discussing these. And this is an alternative. I guess it was set up by the government in order to save people, these problems of not being able to get insurance. And they do that for healthcare as well. Like if you go to certain clinics and you don't have access to healthcare, they can put you onto a kind of California plan that's free to enable you to get access to essential healthcare. It's a thing in this county, or in this state, I should say. Advocates for affordable housing, including the executive director of Yes in My Backyard, Sonia Strauss, which is based in San Francisco, they're beginning to explicitly argue that increased urban density can mitigate climate change and wildfire risk. It says more affordable housing in the city will reduce the number of people moving outwards to the WI for economic reasons, and it can provide a landing place for those moving back in. They're probably places that are too dangerous to live, she said. She supports gradual voluntary buyouts of some of these riskiest zones, but there has to be some place for people to go. Well, isn't this the problem? Isn't this the problem? That we are living in a county or in a state that is prone to wildfire and earthquake. And so what do? Do you want to move out of state? Or do you want to stay and enjoy the benefits of California? I wouldn't live anywhere else. I'm quite happy to take the risk of earthquakes and, rain damage. I mean, part of the reason why all of the buildings leak here is because there's not enough rain to test them when they build them. There's such little rain that they just sometimes don't bother making decent roofs or repairing damaged roofs. Many of the West's most flammable landscapes are deeply meaningful to people who are connected to the place they live by livelihood or cultural community. The WI is cluttered with ticky-tacky homes, banged up to cream profits off the bonkers housing market. But where the city grades into the country, you can also find tribal homelands, little towns that have been there for generations, working forests and cattle ranches, places that would break your heart to leave if you were there, and if you were from there. Staying means rethinking how we pool risk. Our modern insurance systems rests on contracts between individuals and businesses. So, I was saying this about Ukraine, people who don't quite understand why Ukrainians don't just want to leave and why would they want to stay somewhere that looks completely devastated. And the reality is that it is their home. And if you are from a place, a special place, and you want to stay in that place, because it's your home, Some people are not naturally nomadic. They don't want to be refugees. They want to they want to dig in. And I was saying yesterday that this is the same with Afghanistan, which is fundamentally why the Taliban won. The Taliban are from Afghanistan. That's their home. That's who these people are. And I was explaining to Hal, I think, your pal and my pal, Hal, who's on next, that, the Taliban were paying more than the Afghani army. People are prepared to work for the highest bidder. And if the Afghan army were paying $30 a day, then the Taliban were going to pay $50 a day to get people to come and join them. And that's how they won. They recruited a lot more people. They grew. The Taliban didn't just disappear. People stopped working for the Taliban. The Taliban was less prominent. And then suddenly the Taliban got given the space to operate. And so they came back. But they came back by recruiting people. The Taliban themselves are a bunch of leaders, right? They're like a handful of people who lead the Taliban. The actual Taliban, the numbers of Taliban are just regular Afghanis who are being paid to work for them. And yes, some of which have been radicalized and some of which have extreme beliefs and, you can't really reason with, but others are just wanting to feed their families and are prepared to take the money in order to do that. And if you have a family, you'll know that you will literally do anything to feed your kids and to give them what you deserve or what you had maybe. Let's also talk about China a little bit because, we never really spend much time talking about China. The Chinese threat that no one is talking about and how to counter it. Yes, in a military conflict, it says, a Chinese Indian Ocean fleet would be even more threatening. It could disrupt trade flows in the Indian Ocean for the US or its allies or impede American military access. China could also attack US or allied forces swinging from the Mediterranean or Middle East or Diego Garcia to the Pacific. Part of the reason the Indian Ocean hasn't received as much attention as it should is that many US defense experts assume or hope that they can rely on India to automatically be a counterweight to China in this region. For over 2 decades, Washington has been enamored with the idea that India, at one point exceeding 8% economic growth annually, would become a military powerhouse that could frustrate China's hegemonic ambitions. The US Indo-Pacific strategy released in February counts on India to be a net security provider, just as previous administrations officially banked on the Indian Navy taking a leading role in maintaining Indian Ocean security. Some former Trump administration officials even want to formalize a Japan-style alliance. But India's ability to play this role is in serious doubt. Indian officials had targeted a 200-ship navy by 2023. Today, the Indian Navy acknowledges it will be fortunate to reach 170 total ships sometime in the 2030s. Even if it does, analysts worry that India may still be held back by a fleet that's continuously underfunded and 60% obsolescent, with serious deficiencies in equipment and manpower. And as India's navy slides in the opposite direction of China's, it doesn't help that India's political influence in its neighborhood has also wobbled. within a decade, India may not even be able to protect its own backyard against Chinese military at sea or even on land. And China really has been a bit of a silent partner in this war on Ukraine, hasn't it? It's kind of kept out of it purposely, stayed away. We were saying yesterday that maybe it's doing it on purpose because it sees that Russia is going to fall, as in be ostracized from the international community, and China will pick up where Russia left off. And China stands to benefit from the fall of Russia, in addition to the fall of Ukraine. Oh, Stacey has to go. Bye, Stacey. Thank you for sticking around for so long. Naim has joined us. Marilyn as well. Stephen, first time on the show. Thank you. Mickey and Bruce. Wonderful to have you here on Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. It's 10:24 here on the West Coast. It's 1:24 Eastern. I'm Anthony Davis. You have me until 11 o'clock Pacific. That's 2 o'clock Eastern. And then your pal Hal is here. We're looking at a kind of geopolitical situation here at the moment. Russia, Ukraine, China, and India, of course. Eves has joined us as well for the first time. Internet and Patty's in Missouri. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So where did Washington's bet on India go wrong? Well, first, it's important to acknowledge that India itself bears significant responsibility. An economic slowdown that began years before the global pandemic constrained Indian investments in its navy. India has long-standing, well-documented problems of anemic defense budgets, excessive personnel costs, and dysfunctional procurement processes. Internal disputes among the military services and a lack of foresight by civilian leadership contributed to an Indian strategy that focuses too much on land borders and not enough on air and naval capabilities. I mean, India is a very interesting country to me because, it's a former British colony, and the Brits went there and they built railway, the railway network and the train service and the roads and colonial-style buildings. And there's a lot of kind of British influence in the Indian way, just the way they handle, like, tickets for trains. And, there's something very beautiful about this culture. They're obsessed with detail. They're obsessed with, like, you can't get on a train without a ticket. They love this kind of transactional approach, And the minutiae of a culture is very interesting to me. It's why you have to travel and relocate and move and not be shy to leave your hometown. Get a sense of what's happening in another country. And, you really have to live somewhere to experience how it operates. And for me, I moved from an English-speaking country to an English-speaking country, and I did that on purpose because I didn't want to have to learn another language because I'm lazy and selfish. But I also recognize that I've had to learn a whole new culture coming to America. And there are things that I just can't say here. There's words that I cannot communicate without being misunderstood. I'm very interested in how American conversation is much more linear than British conversation. And there's less place for humor in American conversation. It's very compartmentalized. There's room for humor in a comedy club. But if you take the humor that Brits tend to lace all conversations with and put it into anything that is like, it kind of falls on deaf ears. Not with all people, of course, but with a lot of people. They're like, hang on a second, why are we doing comedy now? That's reserved for comedy clubs. This compartmentalization of different types of conversation. So if you go into a pharmacy, you can't make a joke, right? It's like you can't make a joke in a pharmacy. That's the pharmacy. In a restaurant you can, because it's more of a social space. But like if anything is vaguely official, like a doctor's surgery, I think that it's all very serious. There's this inability to kind of lose sight of the seriousness of things. And I think that Britain is different to that. I think Britain has been through so many different reboots over so many thousands of years from, the Roman invasion. That really British people seem to have a much less serious grasp on culture because it's forever changing. And it will change again, time. And I used to see it living in London, how driving changed. I love to drive. And I would see how driving styles would change over the years as different people moved through London. It became more transient. And because I drove on the continent as well, I recognized driving styles from places I'd lived in or stayed in on the continent that were encroaching on London. Very subtle changes in culture, you know? And it's so interesting. It has to be embraced, you know. You can't, if you're like a stick in the mud and you just refuse to kind of accept change, then you're just going to be permanently frustrated. Something wonderful about the changing demographic and the changing culture and you know, the rise of feminism and the rise of civil rights. You know, these things are designed to make places better, more diverse and more interesting. And tragically, you know, everything I watched Trump's rally yesterday. Everything I heard from him was about going back to whiteness and only being a good American if you're a white American. You know, the racist undertones are so clear to me now. Once you know what he's saying, it's very easy to see what he's saying and kind of crack the code. And anybody who's a kind of white supremacist who fears for the changing demographic in America is going to watch Trump's speech and be completely taken in by his desire to make America white again. To connect with this historic version of America. And it isn't that anymore, you know? Places change for a reason. You know, they change because they needed to change. They don't change just for the sake of it. And so it's for the rest of us to kind of embrace change and accept it and realize that, you know, even though men are consistently the ones running the companies and being in the boardrooms, they're also the people that have screwed up the most. You know? I really do wish that if the leader of Russia was a woman and not a man, we wouldn't be looking at a war right now, you know? We need women more than ever in high-ranking places, officials, you know? I mean, the deputy prime minister in Ukraine is a female, and she's fierce. She's amazing, if you've seen her talk, but she's quite something. Kind of she's a perfect kind of foil for Zelensky. So when we look to India with Narendra Modi, or we look to Russia with Putin, and we look to Ukraine with Volodymyr Zelensky, all I see is like men and their machismo egos going up against each other, wanting to be the biggest and have the biggest guns and the greatest armory and artillery, and it's like, really? Like, we're still playing these war games now in 2022. We're still playing these, you know, goodies and baddies, cowboys and Indians. We're still playing these games. It's very interesting to me. You know, it's so important that we learn as much as we can about different cultures and different people and how culture evolves, you know. Not race, because we're all one race, you know. Hopefully the human race is the only race you subscribe to. Harry's joined us for the first time. Welcome. Dawn says you're hilarious. Thank you, Dawn. Patty and Internet and Eve and Name, Marilyn, Stephen, Mickey, Bruce, Jessica, Tamika, hello, Paul and Debbie and Eric, Laurie, Tracy, Jerry. Welcome to Backchannel. Thank you for joining us this morning. 10:32 Pacific, 1:32 Eastern. I'm Anthony Davis. As we're kind of looking through some of these big stories, we got through the morning papers very quickly this morning. Should we talk about Kyrsten Sinema, everybody's least favorite person? She is, of course, one of the dynamic duo. She is the Robin to Joe Manchin's Batman, the two baddies in the Democratic Party who want to derail the entire Democratic movement for a generation. Yes, signed by more than 100 Arizona-based LGBTQ activists and national supporters, a letter has charged that Sinema's position on the filibuster is preventing the Equality Act from passing. I find this very interesting. This is a liberal group that helped push Emily's List to cut ties with Senator Kyrsten Sinema over her opposition to changing Senate rules, has a new target in its pressure campaign, the Human Rights Campaign. The Arizona Coalition to End the Filibuster has helped organize an open letter to the LGBTQ organization, urging it to withdraw financial support from Sinema until she reverses her position and supports eliminating the filibuster. The letter also calls for donors to HRC to stop funding the group unless it backs away from the senator. It says the toll of Sinema's obstruction, which HRC continues to tactically support and thus enable, for constituents is growing each day. The letter reads, with the filibuster blocking popular legislation backed by all or nearly all Democrats to address the urgent issues of reproductive justice, immigrant rights, gun violence, and police reform. Where's my little knob gone? Oh, it moved over here. There we go. Got a little knob on here that just I wanted to flick. Excuse me. So signed by more than 100 Arizona-based activists and national supporters, the letter also charges Sinema's position on the filibuster is preventing the Equality Act from passing. The civil rights legislation would give legal protections to LGBTQ people, which Democrats said is even more urgent in the wake of the Republican-controlled states passing laws such as Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. The campaign against HRC is the latest example of Sinema and her supporters coming under fire by Democratic activists, donors, and lawmakers because she stood by the filibuster, which effectively requires 60 votes to pass most bills. Emily's List, formerly one of Sinema's largest financial backers, said in January it would cut her off unless she got behind ending the filibuster. I mean, my friend refers to Sinema and Manchin as bought and paid for. You know? Bought and paid for. These people are so in the pockets of big business that they really have no opinions. I mean, if you heard what Joe Manchin said yesterday about electric cars, it was so offensive. It was so completely ridiculous that I just thought, how can anybody take him seriously if this is the kind of language that he uses? I mean, he is so dumb. It's almost as if, like, people look up to him because he's a senator. But the reality is you don't have to be smart to be a senator. You can just be an idiot, you know? Why not? I'll read you what he said. This was regarding electric cars, right? Because, you know, he represents the coal industry. So it says, faced with rising gasoline prices, many Americans are now looking to switch to an electric car. But the shift away from fossil fuel vehicles has been criticized by Senator Joe Manchin, who said he's very reluctant to see the proliferation of battery-powered cars. Manchin, the centrist Democrat, Republican, who holds a key swing state vote in the U.S. Senate, has poured scorn on the idea of phasing out gasoline and diesel cars. He said, I'm very reluctant to go down the path of electric vehicles. I'm old enough to remember standing in line in 1974 trying to buy gas. I remember those days. I don't want to have to be standing in line waiting for a battery for my vehicle because we're now dependent on a foreign supply chain, mostly China. He said, I've read history and I remember Henry Ford inventing the Model T, but I sure as hell don't remember the US government building filling stations, Manchin said. To applause, the market did that. I mean, the guy's just an idiot, you know? Does he know that electric vehicles don't take AA batteries? Is he aware that America is starting to make its own batteries? That we could be energy independent and free from foreign and corrupt world powers and leading the world in renewable energy if we chose to? Well, the answer is yes. He does know. But he also is from a family that has a fossil fuel business. And he represents West Virginia, which is a coal town, mining town. And, you know, he basically refuses to realize that climate change is more important than any of these things. It's a very short-termist attitude, and it's very disappointing because, you know, what we're going to end up with is like a whole bunch of people basically dying because they don't have access to clean air. In the same way that, it's going to be too hot to live in certain parts of the United States. Ventura County is heated up 3.8 degrees above pre-industrial levels here in California. It's too much. We can't weather this. So I really feel like people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, the dynamic duo, they need to recognize that they are not just benefiting themselves in the short term, but they are preventing an entire generation of people from seeing the country evolve at the same rate that other countries have. Because, people seem to think that America is like leading the world on this. And America is so behind the rest of the world, but people don't leave America, so they don't realize. America is so behind the rest of the world when it comes to all of this stuff. I mean, Costa Rica is now completely carbon neutral. Are you aware of that? Costa Rica basically does not require any fossil fuel. Now, I know that its population is lower, and I know that it's coastal, and I know that it has all of these, other elements that enable it to go carbon neutral so quickly. But the point is that they have done it. They've proved that it's possible, and it's been proved that it's possible in America as well. It's just people don't want to hear it. And you have the likes of Sinema and the likes of Joe Manchin making up lies about electric cars. These are the people that are preventing America from keeping up with the rest of the world. And yet people continue to vote for them. It makes no sense to me. Janet has joined us. Hello, Janet. Welcome. Tom's here as well. Stephen, first time on the show from Alabama. Welcome. I've got my eye on you. So, if you want to join in, you can wake up your Echo Show, say the word "say" and then your message, and it comes through to me here. If you'd like to type a message into the show, then just go to backchannel.tv. You can do that on your web browser, on your phone, on your laptop, on your desktop, or however you choose to go there. And finally, there's YouTube. You can follow the show on YouTube. You can comment in the comments section. Loads of ways to get in touch with this program here. Let's continue with our conversation, because we're getting very close to focusing on our Women's History Month candidate for today. I often feel like it's a part of the show that I really look forward to, because I know that we're going to get a kind of full potted history of somebody's life. We leave nothing out, down to the number of children they had, where they relocated, where they were educated, how they escaped persecution, or whatever the story may be. It's like something that we like to focus on here at the end of the show. And this month, it's Women's History Month. Last month was Black History Month. Occasionally, we combine the two. Because, contrary to popular belief, it is possible to be black and female and superstar. Talking of black females, less so superstar, I was watching Candace Owens this morning. Do you know who Candace Owens is? She's like a celebrity in the far-right movement. The right wing has kind of embraced her because she's very beautiful, she's very eloquent, she seems to be very intelligent, but she is completely insane. Her views are so extreme. But because she says it with such aplomb, people think that she must know what she's talking about. Because, the ability here in America to kind of understand the difference between somebody who is making sense and somebody who's making no sense, it's very narrow. It's a bit like Jordan Peterson, this kind of far-right-leaning university professor who's written a bunch of books and people think is the second coming. And the reality is he's just a far-right extremist with a fantastic vocabulary and amazing recall. And Candace Owens is kind of the similar, Her husband is the creator of Parler, I think, which is this kind of right-wing social media service. But she said some stuff this morning that I saw reported, and I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, again, she is supporting Russia rather than Ukraine. And there's been a lot of noise about her this morning. See if I can find the clip and maybe I can play it to you. She claimed that Hitler was fine until he started operating outside of Germany's borders. Now she's turning her historical expertise onto Ukraine. Let me play you this clip. It's only a minute long, but this is Candace Owens this morning spreading lies and misinformation to a huge audience. She has a massive following about Ukraine. Here it is.
We've got some mean tweets that I haven't seen yet, so we're going to read some of them. This is going to be fun. Oh, someone said to me, okay, I guess this is in response to a tweet where I said, I'm the only person who has considered how pulling out of Afghanistan and starting a war with Russia are related from an energy policy perspective. And Anthony said, hey, McFly, we didn't start a war with Russia. Putin didn't even start a war. He started a genocidal colonization. Where are you? Ukraine is defending itself and the rest of the world from an authoritarian regime, and all you can think about is fossil fuel profitability. Wow, a genocidal colonization is interesting. Again, going back to my point of people being stupid, he's not trying to commit a genocide of the Ukrainians. That obviously makes no sense because there is no difference ethnically from Ukrainians and Russians. Obviously, Ukraine wasn't a thing until 1989. Ukraine was created by the Russians. It was, they speak Russian. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And again, this entire episode has been exposing to you how ignorant people are about the goals of Vladimir Putin. He has goals. The goal is not to just get rid of Ukrainians. That makes entirely no sense. It would not be helpful for him. So I would just encourage that guy to get a little more
educated. None of that is true. Like, none of it. I mean, this is what drives me crazy about this kind of misinformation campaign is when you put lipstick on it, it's almost like it becomes a thing. And it's not a thing. And years ago, people did not really have a chance to broadcast their opinions. If you had opinions, they were saved for your family and friends. But now people's opinions, like hers, which are outlandish and full of falsehoods, become mainstream just by nature of the coverage that they get because of social media and, everything else. And she gets invited on the news all the time, or various, channels, wouldn't necessarily call them the news. But she is dangerous. She's dangerous to society because she has fringe views, but she is able to present them because she is so eloquent and gives the impression of being intelligent. It is possible to be highly intelligent and also completely insane. It is possible to appear highly educated and also have extremist views. The only difference is it's like who gives you the license and the platform to actually present your views. And this is why, people are saying, well, why did CNN or any of these, mainstream news channels carry Donald Trump's speeches or his rallies? Why would they carry those? Surely they're just amplifying what he has to say. I personally think they should carry them so people can see quite what it is that, the world is dealing with. Ariel's joined us. Hello, Ariel. Welcome. Curly, first time on the show from New York. Janina just popped in from New Mexico. Aya is here as well. Rocky's joined us. Murdo and Janet and Tom and Stephen, thank you for joining us here on Backchannel. It's wonderful to know you're getting ready for Hal's show. I'm Anthony Davis. We're discussing, talking about all sorts of things, but, right now the misinformation that is causing people to not quite understand how the conflict between Russia and Ukraine came about. They've been fighting for 9 years. Didn't just start 3 weeks ago. Let's also turn to Selma Burke now, because we're celebrating Women's History Month, and I would like to do that as a feminist myself, I feel like, this is the least we can do, is spend a little bit of time celebrating some of the great women of our generation, or indeed a previous generation. Selma Burke discovered her love for sculpture as a young child and followed her passion to Harlem Renaissance, New York, Parisian art studios, and even the White House. The artist behind President Franklin Roosevelt's image on the dime, she was a dedicated art teacher and one of the most notable sculptors of the 20th century. She was born in 1900 on December 31st in Mooresville, North Carolina. So she was very nearly born in 1901. Isn't that interesting? Her father was a Methodist minister who also worked on the railroads and cruise ships. Burke's interest in art began at an early age, sculpting small objects and animals with white clay from a nearby riverbed. One day I was mixing the clay and I saw the imprint of my hands, she told the New York Post in 1945. I found that I could make something that I alone had created. Well, Burke's father encouraged her artistic pursuits. She often used the objects that he brought back from his ocean travels as the models for her sculptures. Her interest in African art began with a collection of African artifacts the family inherited from Burke's uncles who had done missionary work abroad. Her mother, on the other hand, encouraged her to follow the more practical career path of nursing. She graduated from the Slater Industrial and Slater Normal School in 1922, went on to St. Agnes Training School for Nurses in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she graduated as a registered nurse in 1924. After that, she completed further nursing training in Philadelphia and married her childhood friend, Durant Woodward, but she was widowed when he died not long after their wedding. Oof, that's very sad. You know, you're not just losing your husband, but you're also losing your best friend, a childhood friend. I think it's a very good idea to marry a childhood friend, We're all just craving friendship at the end of the day, aren't we? Friendship with a few extras now and then. Burke moved to New York City in the late 1920s, where she worked as the private nurse for Amelia Waring, an heiress to the Otis elevator empire. I do love an Otis elevator, don't you? Love it. Waring helped Burke gain exposure to the arts and culture scenes in New York. She began socializing with the artists and writers associated with the Harlem Renaissance. She was romantically involved with poet and novelist Claude McKay, but it was a tumultuous pairing and the two soon separated. After Waring's death, Burke left nursing and turned to focus on sculpture. She studied art at Sarah Lawrence College, modeling to pay for her classes. She twice traveled to Europe to hone her technique, where she studied under artists such as Henri Matisse and Aristide Maillol in Paris. But with the threat of Nazism rising in Europe, she returned to the United States and taught art to youth in New York City through the Works Progress Administration Federal Art Project of the Harlem Community Arts Center, where influential sculptor Augusta Savage was her mentor. In 1940, she opened the Selma Burke School of Sculpture, and next year Burke was earning a Master of Fine Arts degree from Columbia University and held her first solo exhibit in a New York gallery. Well, following entry of the United States into World War II, Burke enlisted in the Navy, becoming one of the first African-American women to sign up. Her assignment was to drive a truck at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. She injured her back on the job, and while recuperating, she won a nationwide contest for the commission of a bronze relief portrait of President Franklin Roosevelt. Burke felt that photographs of Roosevelt were inadequate for her needs and resisted a sitting with the president so she could draw him. Roosevelt agreed, and Burke sketched Roosevelt over 2 days in February of 1944. Well, Roosevelt passed away a year later. His successor, Harry Truman, unveiled Burke's relief portrait at the Recorder of Deeds building in Washington on September 24, 1945. And though she endorsed it, Eleanor Roosevelt reportedly did not like the portrait at first, as it depicted her husband as a younger man. Burke responded that she intended the image to represent Roosevelt as Americans had long known him, not as he appeared in his final years. In addition to the bronze portrait, Burke's profile of Roosevelt is widely acknowledged as the basis for his image on the U.S. dime. The dime's image is officially attributed to U.S. Mint chief engraver John Sinek, but many, including Burke, claim that Sinek borrowed from Burke's depiction. Burke described herself as a people's sculptor and intended for her art to speak to wide audiences, including those who lacked an arts education. Her work often focused on the human body. She used brass, bronze, alabaster, and limestone, among other materials, and her sculptures included figures and busts of prominent African Americans such as John Brown, Duke Ellington, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Philip A. Randolph. Or A. Philip Randolph, I should say. Some of her well-known pieces include Torso, Temptation, Woman and Child, and Together. She married again to the architect Herman Cobb in 1949. The two moved to an artists' colony in New Hope, Pennsylvania. Cobb passed away in 1955, but Burke remained in Pennsylvania for the rest of her life. Wow, she really dealt with a lot of loss, didn't she? I mean, she really didn't have relationships for very long. I mean, that was like 6 years they were together. She continued to emphasize arts education, running the Selma Burke Art Center in Pittsburgh from 1968 through 1981. She taught children about the vibrancy of sculpture and encouraged them to touch works of art in order to fully understand them. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter awarded Burke with the Women's Caucus for Art Lifetime Achievement Award. Burke received honorary doctorates from Livingston College in 1970 and Spelman College in 1988. Well, she completed her final sculpture in 1980, a 9-foot bronze statue of Martin Luther King Jr. that stands in Marshall Park in Charlotte, North Carolina. She passed away in 1995 in New Hope, Pennsylvania. Her sculptures are still on display at institutions such as Winston-Salem State University, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the Mooresville Public Library in her North Carolina hometown. So there we are. Selma Burke, who discovered her love for sculpture as a young child and followed her passion to Harlem, Renaissance, New York, Parisian art house studios, and even the White House. Today we celebrate her on Women's History Month, combined a little with Black History Month, left over from last month. You know, because every month is Black History Month here on Backchannel. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you to everybody who's, clicked in, who's been in the chat, who's followed along, who's messaged the show. Daniel, Madeline, Gianni, Janina, Curly and Ariel, and Aya, Rocky, Murdo, Janet, Tom, Stephen, Harry, Dawn, Patty, Internet, Yves, Name, Marilyn, Stephen, Mickey, Bruce, Jessica, Tamika, and Paul, and Debbie, and Eric, and Tracy, and Laurie, and Stacy. Thank you. Appreciate you. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll do it again then. We'll spend some time together. But right now, stay with Backchannel for Your Pal Hal next.